शृणुयाम देवाः भद्रं पश्येमाक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैस्तुष्टुवागुंसस्तनूभिः व्यशेम देवहितं यदायुः स्वस्ति न इन्द्रो वृद्धश्रवाः स्वस्ति नः पूषा विश्ववेदाः स्वस्ति नस्तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्टनेमिः स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्दधातु ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः।
श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शङ्करं लोकशङ्करम्।
So we were still discussing the 16th Karika, that is Anadi Mayaya Supto Yada Jiva Prabudhyade Ajam Anidram Aswapnam Advaitam Buddhyade Tada. So the Bhashya is continuing. The Bhashya commentaries on these important terms. Ajam Anidram Aswapnam means birthless, sleepless, beyond sleep, beyond the Shadvikaras. Ajam here means Shadvikaras. Jayade asti vardhade viparinamadi apakshiyade vinashyadi. 6 vikaras. So this Turiya, this Atman is beyond Shadvikaras, beyond changes in the Avasthatraya, it's called Avasthatraya Abadhita, and then it is Anidram, it is devoid of Sushupti, which means it's devoid of Jagrat and Swapna state. It transcends, devoid of means transcending, going beyond. It's not limited to any of the 3 states. It's present, but still it transcends. And Advaitam, one without the seconds. So that's the Bhashya continues. So the Yada Jiva Prabudhyade, that is the central thesis here. It is with an important, the most vital point here. Means if a spiritual seeker is ready through his sadhana chadushtaya sampatti, through his early disciplines, and also Sravana, Manana, Nididhyasana, then he will be completely free from all sankalpas and he will be completely ready and fit for the highest realization. For such a person, just Sravana of Upadesha, that is Tattvamasi Mahavakya Sravana, will immediately lead him to his spiritual awakeness. But that's possible only if he is completely free from all the accumulated samskaras, vasanas, sankalpas, and so on. So normally, according to Vedanta, what conceals the reality, what prevents us from this waking up, is this accumulation of samskaras, vasanas and vrittis and sankalpas, which prevent us from waking up to our own reality. But we should remember, it doesn't mean that just listening even before we are ready is of no use, not at all. It has its use, it has its benefit. So that's why in the definitions of Sravana, Manana, Nididhyasana, you find the normal Sravana, which constitute part of disciplines. That is one of these 7 disciplines. That is sadhana chadushtaya sambatti, the 4 important preliminary qualifications, plus Sravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. I mean, Sotavyo, Mantavyo, Nididhyasana, Vyakarana. That's a mantra, it's a pramana sloka here. One should listen, one should meditate on the meaning of one listens, and then one should internalize through meditation. So these are the three disciplines after sadhana chatushtaya sampatti, which are normally prescribed as disciplines for the spiritual seeker. That Sravana, as I mentioned earlier, is different from the Sravana which makes you wake up. So there are two Sravanas. Sravanas literally means listening, but that's not the real meaning. Itham vakyehi tadarthanusandhanam Sravanam bhavi. That is a Panchadesi Vidyaranya's definitions now. So you listen to something, and then as you listen, you constantly follow internally the essence, the implication of what you listen, what you hear. That is Sravana as a discipline. And then Manana is Sodavya Mantavyo, Sudasya Arthasya Upabattibhis Chintanam means. So you listen to something and you understand the meaning, and then logically you contemplate the implications and meaning of what you hear, and constantly internalize. Yuktya sambhavidatva anusandhanam mananam tu tat. That is in Panchadesikam. That is manana. So yuktya sambhavidatva anusandhanam. So we should listen, and then there is one way of bringing what we listen, bringing what we understand by listening into our own system. That is Upabattibhis Chintanam or Yuktya Anusandhanam. Both are important words here. So in that respect, Manana is a logical continuation of Sravana. And then Vijadaya Pratyaya Tiraskarena Sajadaya Pratyaya Pravahikaranam Nitidhyasanam. So what happens, the Sajadaya Pratyaya Pravahikaranam. Pratyaya means whatever we make out when we try to understand. Pratyaya could mean jnanam also, means not Brahma jnanam, but our logical comprehension could be pratyaya. So when we listen to something and then we contemplate on the meaning, then we reach a point where we filter out, we reject all contrary thoughts. That is Vijadaya Pratyaya. And Sajadaya Pratyaya Pravahikaranam. When the same idea, positive spiritual idea, continues as an unbroken flow, then we become one with it. That is the internalization. Mere rough English translations. So that Sajadaya Pratyaya Pravahikaranam is Nidhyasanam. These disciplines are necessary for attaining fitness for the real Sravanam. And when you reach that level of spiritual fitness, and then when you get Mahavakya Sravanam, then Yada Tada Prabuddhide. That is the thesis of Sabda Parokshawada. Now, what about those who don't reach this level of fitness? So this Sravanam, this Yada Tada Prabuddhide Sabda Paroksha, when you are fully qualified through these 7 disciplines, then when you have Sravanam, Tattvamasi Mahavakya Sravanam, then immediately Aham Brahmasmi Anubhuti will come. It is the essence of Sabda Parokshawada. But this is only for Uttamadhigaris. That's an important point. It's only for Uttamadhigaris. Madhyama and Adhamadhigaris will have to go through the elaborate process of continuing this Sravana, Manana, Nididhyasana, reinforcing sadhana chatushtaya, practicing upasana, meditation, puja, worship, prayer, whatever it is, and then gradually they reach a point of the highest fitness. Then they also will get Sabda Paroksha Jnanam at a later stage, but not immediately. So that process of gradual evolution is called dhyana abhyasa, it is called prasankhyanam in the technical language of Vedanta. Prasankhyanam is essential for everyone according to Bhamadi Prasthana. Shabda Aparokshawada is the thesis of Vivarana Prasthana. But in reality, there is not much difference, because those who have already reached the end of the highest fitness through Prasankhyana, for them Shabda Aparoksha will be natural. Now, according to the Bhamadi Prasthana, this is very important. You know, this passage, this is the Bhashya paragraph, which actually, of course, there are many more similar passages, but this is the beginning of that series of passages in the Bhashya. You can find such passages in the Sutra Bhashya, in the Chandogya and Brihadaranyaka Bhashyas also you find. So this is the genesis of the conflict or controversy between Bhamadi Prasthana and Vivarana Prasthana. So according to Bhamadi Prasthana, which again we should remember, it is the evolution of Bhamadi Prasthana. You know, Bhamadi is a commentary by Vajaspati Misra on Brahma Sutra Bhashya. And again, Kalpataru is a commentary by Amalananda, that is again on Bhamadi. And then the Parimala, Kalpataru Parimala is a work by Appaya Dikshita, who further elaborates on this Prasankhyanā in his own book. So according to this, it's called Parimala Paddhati in the traditional Vedantic circles, Parimala Paddhati. But for them, you should listen to this Tattvamasi Sravana, then you should have Sravana Vritti. You should go on listening. Every day you should do Parayana, reading, understanding, meditation, and so on. And along with that, you should practice also upasana, meditation, but not karma, because that will make it jnana karma samuccaya. So that Vajaspati doesn't agree with this. All that's the thesis of Bharta Prapancha, Brahmadatta, and the earlier Mandana, that is jnana karma samuccaya, which is in total conflict with the essence of Advaita. So Bhamadikara says, followed by Amalananda and Appaya Dikshita, you should first of all listen to Mahavakya, then you should do Sravana-vritti, and through Sravana-vritti, constant listening, upasana and meditation, you will get Paroksha Jnanam, that is Siddhanta Jnanam, with some Anubhuti, and this Paroksha Jnanam will eventually make you ready for the real Sravana, and then you will get Aparoksha Jnanam. So there is a Sravana-vritti and Paroksha Jnanam are two intermediary stages for the Prasankhyanavadins. So that is a departure from the original Bhashya here. That's why you find the majority of the post-Shankarite Vedantists did belong to Vivarana school of Shabda Aparokshawada, which is again corroborated in the life of Sri Ramakrishna and some of the great spiritual teachers who came later. So that is why Nasi evam tvam hetu phalatmakakha kintu tattvamasi idi pradibodhyamanakha yada tada evam pradibudhyate katham nasmin bahyam abhyantaram va janmadi bhava vikaraka asti. So in you, that's literal meaning, Bhahyam Abhyantaram Va, in this Brahmajnanam or in Brahmajnani, there is no Shadvikaras, and there is no continuation of the samsara chakra, mean birth, death and rebirth. Ataha ajam. Therefore, this reality is ajam, it is Shadvikaratītam, transcending the six changes of being born, then existing, then growing, then evolving, then decaying and disappearing or dying out. That is the 6 changes. Sabahya bhendro hi ajaha iti srutehe sarva bhava vigara varjidam ityarthaha. Yasmat janmadhikarana bhutam. So, nasmin avidya tamo bijam nidra vidyate. Therefore, in you there is no nidra. Nidra is agrahanam. And if there is no nidra, that means sushupti, then there will be no swapna. So, you are beyond, you transcend the avasthatraya. That is Jagra, Swapna, Sushupti stage. Nasmin avidya tamo bijam nidra. Nidra here means avidya. Avidya vidya. Nidra here in this context means avidya. So avidya is the micro dimension of Maya. Of course, avidya and Maya should never be considered to be identical. Maya exists in Ishvara, avidya exists in Jiva. Maya is Bhavarupa, avidya is not Bhavarupa. So, one aspect of Maya can be called, a Sattviki aspect, it is called, the Vidya Maya we call it, that helps you to study Shastras, to meditate, to evolve in spiritual life. But it's opposite. Avidya Maya takes you in the opposite direction. So Maya and Avidya are not the same thing. Avidya is used only in the context of individual jiva, related to Adhyasa. Maya is related to Ishvara. Maya is a tool in the hands of Ishvara for creating the world. Maya is the technical term that alone explains the mystery of this Brahman appearing to be Jagat. So, but Avidya, technically translated into ignorance, is something that exists in all of us, that really expresses itself in the form of sankalpas, vikalpas, conflicts, thoughts, ideas, and so on, which create a veil or a curtain that prevents us from understanding our own true nature. So that is the, nasmin avidya vidyate iti anidram. Anidram. So, anidram means parajagrat. Anidra. Anidra means that is that which is devoid of sushupti. And sushupti is agrahana, non-apprehension. And if there is no non-apprehension, then there will be no false apprehension either. So, if you have no nidra, no sushupti, there will be no jagrat. Mean you be beyond, you transcend jagrat, waking and dream states. And that state is called parajagrat. I mean the real, the state of real being really awakened. It doesn't mean that a Brahmajnani will not go to sleep. But the sleep also takes place within the Jagrat state. So for a Brahmajnani who has realized his Turiya state, his Sushupti also happens within this Parajagrat. On the other hand, for an Ajnani, he is waking up. Jagrat state actually takes place in Sushupti only. Because he is deep asleep in a spiritual sense. So his waking up is actually a state within sleep. For a jnani, for a realized person, his sleep actually takes place in a state of being awakened. So that is a transcendental awakening, is called parajagrat. The transcendental sleep is called agrahana. So for normal persons, when we are awakened in the ordinary biological physical sense, but really speaking, that happens only in a state of spiritual sleep. So far as we are not so long as we are not aware of our turiya identity. So avidya vidyate iti anidram. Anidram hi tat turiyam. So that is the real nature of turiya. It is beyond Jagrat, Swapna, Sushupti state. Ateva Swapnam. So there is no Jagrat, no Swapna, no Sushupti in a person who has realized his Turiya state, because he has reached the Parajagrat, supreme awareness, spiritual awareness. That you find this happening in the Gandhara Purusha Drishtanta, the 14th Brahmana of Chandogya, 6th chapter. You find Tattwamasi Mahavakya Upadesha, when the pilgrim was brought to the main street by the Acharya Upadesha. Then he asked him, Edam Gandhara, Evam Praja, you go in this direction, you reach your Gandhara, your native place. The pilgrim continues his journey. And in the process, that is, he has to use his own intelligence, his own ability to stick to the right route, right direction. Bhashya, you have to read the Bhashya, you find. Shankaracharya says, when you are traveling, you are taking your spiritual journey, suddenly you may find a garden, a fruit garden, something that attracts you. You should stick, you should be steadfast, not to be distracted by the distractions. Then you reach your destination. So that is prasankhya. But then the point is, in the Tattwamasi Mahavakya, Shvetaketu did not fully understand the meaning. It took a long time for him to reach the state of Parajagrat. Then he realized. That comes at the end of the 16th Brahmana of the Chandogya 6th chapter. Those of you can read. So, Ataiva Swapnam Tad Nimittatvad Annidha Grahanasya. So, Sushupti is the cause of Annidha Grahana. Annidha Grahana happens in Jagrat state and Swapna state. Annidha Grahana is the result, is caused by Agrahana. Yasmacha Anidram Aswapnam. That's why it is called Anidram Aswapnam, etc. Tasma Ajam Advaitam Turiyam Atmanam Buddhidetada. And when you reach that state, then you will realize this Atman, which is Ajam, Advaitam, etc. So this is the continuation. You can find this prasankhya and sabda aparokshavada many, even in the traditional Christian literature. You find the parable of the sower of the seed. A sower went about sowing his seed, but the result of sowing the seed depends upon the quality of the soil in which the seed falls. When the seed fell in thistles, in bush, in rocky places, it didn't grow, it didn't become sprout, it didn't become a plant or a tree. Only when the seed fell on fertile soil, it grew into a plant. That is sower of the seed in the biblical, in Christ's parable you find. So if the Mahavakya connects with the spiritual seeker of the highest quality, immediately translates into aparokshanubhuti. If it is given to a person uttama, madhyama adhikari or adhama adhikari, those who are not of the highest spiritual fitness, then it may take some time, it may need a lot more effort. That's why if the seed falls in a place with full of weeds and grass, then you have to remove the grass and weeds. Then only it will be useful to you. Of course, the parable doesn't extend to that level, but I'm just extending a bit. That's all. So now we'll come to the very important subject. Prapancha nivritya chet pradibudhide. Anivritte prapanche katham advaitam iti uchyade. So you find in this question, a possible doubt or question or a purva paksha, an objection is raised here. Prapancha nivritya ched pratibuddhiti. If spiritual realization happens when prapancha nivritti, with the cessation of the manifold experiences, that is prapancha. So that could be a possible wrong interpretation that one may get if you read the previous passage. If somebody tells you, you get Advaita realization when the world disappears. If that is the notion that we get out of the previous paragraph, then all these questions may arise. Prapancha nivritya ched pratibuddhiti. If there is spiritual awakening, this identification with Turiya happens when the cessation of prapancha, when the cessation of the manifold material experiences happens, then anivritte prapanche, then if the manifold world doesn't disappear, katham advaita ichchati? Then how can you say is Advaita always exists? Advaita is an experience that takes place when the world disappears. If that is the conclusion, then Advaita depends for its existence on the disappearance of the world of Dvaita. Then how can it be? That is the possible objection. Now the reason for this objection, remember the Purvapaksha is always raised by Shankaracharya himself to emphasize certain points which constitute the vital points of Vedanta. So Purvapaksha, nobody is sitting in front of him and asking a question. He himself possibly raises a possible doubt using that mechanism to further elaborate the central teachings of Advaita. So normally this is the background for this objection is this. People think this world, the prapancha has problems. So we should get rid of this prapancha. The prapancha nirodha. That's the essence of Patanjali's yoga. That is nirodha samadhi. The Ashtanga Yoga, the eighth stage of this Ashtanga Yoga is Nirodha Samadhi. That Samadhi is not Turiya experience. One should remember this very clearly. Shankaracharya accepts and understands, recognizes Ashtanga Yoga, Patanjali Yoga as an important tool to reach the highest state of spiritual fitness, but that highest state is not the highest state of spiritual enlightenment. It's a penultimate state. So, people normally think this prapancha is a big nuisance, a lot of problems, so all the dukkha, conflicts, worries, problems. So one should work hard to get rid of the prapancha nirodha. That's how we reach Advaita Anubhuti. So that means they accept the reality of prapancha, then they accept the need to go beyond prapancha, which is actually in total conflict with the teachings of Advaita Vedanta. So that point is made here. Prapancho yadi vidyeda nivarteda na samseka. Maya matramidam dvedam advedam paramarthadakam. Prapancho yadi vidyeda. If prapancha actually existed, then it has to cease to exist. But prapancha here means, remember, the manifold, the nanatvam, the manifoldness, the totality of worldly experiences all together consist of prapancha. So the Karika says, if the manifold world did really exist, then it has to go away. But actually, it doesn't really exist. Now, it's something like this. You mistake the rope for the snake, and then when you bring light, if you tell me that the snake has disappeared, you are totally wrong. There was no snake to begin with. What you mistook to be the snake is now recognized to be the rope. So what you now mistake as prapancha, Dvaita prapancha, is now recognized to be non-distinct from Brahman. I mentioned this earlier. Brahma Satyam Jagat's Mitya is an approach from Dvaita state. Brahma Satyam Jagat Satyam is the approach from the highest Advaitic experience. That is what is going to be elaborated here. So incidentally, we should remember these analogies, and this is maybe historically those who should remember the rope snake analogy, and then this is called Chaduskodi. Chaduskodi lemma it is called in Greek philosophy. I mean, 4 possible options, 4 possible approaches to reality. This is called lemma. And it's called Chaduskodi. You can find Chaduskodi in Nagarjuna's Madhyamika system, and also in Gaudapada's Karika. Also you find, those of you are interested, Asti Nastyasti Nasti Nasti Divadina Chapunakam. That is Asti Nasti. So different views with regard to Atman. Some people say Asti, the Vaisheshikas. Some people say Nasti, that is Vijnanavadins, Mahayana Vijnanavadins. Asti Nasti is Digambara Jainas, and Nasti Nasti is the view of Vainasikas. Sometimes Vainasikas is called Vijnanavadins, Shunyavadins. Nasti Nasti is the view of Shunyavadins. I mean, exists, not exist. Some people say Atman exists, some people say Atman doesn't exist, some people say Atman exists and also non-exists, and some people say Atman doesn't exist at all, Nasti Nasti. It's called Chaduskodi. So that should be understood at this stage. So Chaduskodi is also found in the Greek skeptical philosophy, skepticism it is called. It's a philosophy of Pyrrhonism. And one important exponent was Sextus Empiricus. So that is called Chaduskodi. Sometimes we call court lemma, it is called. And then the fire smoke analogy, Agni and Dhuma, and Rajju Sarpa, rope snake analogy. So these 3 are common for Greek philosophy, and also from Greek philosophy, in pre-Christian Greek philosophy. Of course, this is more related to Pyrrhonism. It's called Pyre of Elis. And most important exponent of this skepticism was Sextus Empiricus, who expounded this in his well-known work. So these are common, you find. Of course, according to Diogenes, this was the influence of the ancient Indian philosophy on the Greek thinkers belonging to the 4th and 3rd century BC, you find how Indian philosophy influenced Greece. It's a different subject. So that point is to be understood here. Now, Maya matramidam dvaidam advaidam paramarthataha. Now Bhashya continues. Satyamevam siyat prapancho vidi vidyeda. That's true. If prapancha, if the world really existed, then it has to go away. If the snake really existed, then it should disappear. Snake doesn't disappear because the snake did not exist there to begin with. Snake existed only in our head. Similarly, this prapancha also exists in our heads. So when we get this turiya jnanam, world doesn't disappear. That's because the world doesn't appear at all. It doesn't go anywhere because it never came here from anywhere. So only prapancha buddhi goes away. Just like sarpa buddhi goes away. When you bring light, you see the rope, you see it is only a rope, not a snake. So when you get that, realization, then the snake idea, sarpa buddhi, goes away. Sarpa doesn't go away because sarpa did not exist there. That's why satyamevam syat prapancho iti vidyeda rajjuam sarpa iva kalpitatvat natu savidyade. So just like sarpa, even kalpana is also an approximation, because kalpana or sankalpa, it implies the possibility of something. But here, the adhyasa definition should be, it is smriti rupa, because we have seen snakes somewhere earlier, long back, 10 years back, maybe yesterday, in the zoo or in the forest. So that smriti, that memory, exists in our head. And when we see this object in front of us, that memory awakens, and that memory immediately connects with the object in front of us. So we superimpose, do adhyasa on that rope. So that's why rajjuam sarpa iva kalpitatvad nadu vidyate. The prapancha is only a superimposition on Brahman. Vidyamanas ched nivartayeda na samseha. If the world really existed, then it should go away. Whatever we see may not be true. In Vedanta, if we see something with our eyes, anything that we see with our pancha jnanendriyas and mind together, for that very reason, it is a proof that it is not real. Because the absolute reality cannot be seen, cannot be visualized, cannot be experienced as an object in front of us. So if we see something, we perceive something, is a proof that it really doesn't exist in the highest sense. So that's the idea behind. So those who realize the supreme truth, there is neither prapancha nivritti or pravritti. The world doesn't exist, therefore the world doesn't disappear. That's the idea behind. The Maya Matram, that is again, it is sometimes interpreted by commentators, that is again taken from Brahma Sutra. Maya Matram tu karchena anabhivyakta surupatvad. Because this dream creation is only Maya, because it is not a complete manifestation as we find in Jagrata state. So Maya Matram is actually from a Brahma Sutra, I say. Brahma Sutra 3rd Adhyaya, you find Maya Matram tu karchena anabhivyakta surupatvad. So that's the idea behind. So vidyamanas chet nivarteda nahi rajjuam bhranti buddhya kalpita sarpaka vidyamanasan vivekato nivartaka. Nahi rajjuam bhranti buddhya kalpita sarpaka. So now should be, we should do Nyaya to na nivartaka. So now it's not that the snake existed on the rope, and then when we got the Viveka Jnanam, Advaita Jnanam, then that snake disappears. No. That's the same idea. Nahi rajjvam pradhibuddhya kalpita sarpaka. So, not vidyamanaha, san vivekato nivurtaha. We cannot say that when we bring light, when we see the rope, when we understand it is not a snake but a rope, it's not that after existing for some time, the snake goes away. Nacha maya mayavina prayukta taddarshinam chakshud bandha bhagame vidyamana sati nivritta. Similarly, it's not that this maya, this magic, these different objects that we are deluded to see because of the magician's play, not that it exists when we see them and then they disappear after some time. No, because even when we see them, they do not exist. And even before we saw them, they did not exist. Of course, when we cease to see them, they don't exist. Similarly, even when we think, before we brought light in the room, even when we think that it is a snake, there is no snake there. When we bring light, we understand there is no snake, and later also there will be no snake. The question arises, how does a Turiya Jnani look upon this world? So the same rope snake analogy can be extended further. Suppose you bring light and you understand it is only a rope. Maybe after some time when you switch off the light or there is a dim light, again perhaps the idea that it could be a snake may flash in your mind, but it doesn't remain for long. Along with that idea, immediately the reality that it is not a snake but a piece of rope, because you have already verified it earlier, immediately comes. Similarly, a jnani, the world doesn't disappear for him physically. And also not only that, when he lives in this world, prarabdha karmas will continue unfolding. Prarabdha karmas will unfold in the form of sankalpas, vikalpas. Deva sesha swabhavaha, that is mentioned. In this prapancha, the srishti can only be explained as devasya swabhavaha, its nature. So what is our nature? Our accumulated samskaras, vasanas, sankalpas, ideas, impressions, memories, all manovrittis, all these will constitute different forms of unfolding of our true nature. But that true nature and its unfolding doesn't affect our Turiya Jnana. Just as after realizing that it is not a snake but a rope, again the next day when you come to the same room, the resemblance of that object to a snake may come again. But immediately you will remember, yesterday I have verified it is not a snake, it is only a wrong idea. So you will be able to correct yourself, because the realization that it is not a snake but a rope, as you verified yesterday, that will immediately emerge in the mind. So Turiya Jnani, a Brahma Jnani, will live in this world. He will also continue living in this world, interacting with the world, taking responsibilities, taking challenges, everything. But at the subjective level, it doesn't affect his real idea of what he is. Just as the real idea that it is only a rope, not a snake, will always be remembered by you. Anytime, even in future, even if the wrong idea may appear as a snake, it's a crack on the floor. But immediately it will be corrected by your own Turiya Jnana. So that is the idea behind. Naki rajjvam pradibudhya kalpita sarpaha vidyamanasan vivekado na nivrittaha. Nacha maya mayavina prayukta Taddasinam Shashubandhabhagame. So similarly, this magician will come and create these illusions. So these illusions we may see. It's not that after some time these illusions disappear. The illusions never really existed. It is only the buddhi, the Bhranti buddhi that existed. Bhranti buddhi disappears immediately. That tathedam prapanchakyam maya matram dvaidam. That's how this dvaida buddhi, the Bhranti buddhi, is corrected by our own realization. Now this is again related to the how this happens. Normally this is explained in so many different ways in Advaita Siddhi. It's where Madhusudana Saraswati defends different definitions of Mithyatvam, because the psychological mechanism of our being deluded by this prapancha, this manifoldness. The psychological mechanism at the individual level is called avidya, at the cosmic level it is called Maya, and the process of being corrected, the process of transcending that avidya and the influence of Maya is called freedom from Mithyatvam, it is called. So how this happens? So you find there are 5 definitions for Mithyatvam which Madhusudana deals with in the Advaita Siddhi. It's taken from Panchapadika of Padmapada. Then Panchapadika, 2 definitions are from Panchapadika Vyakarana of Prakashatmedi. 1 definition is from Tattva-pratipika of Chitsuki it's called. And another one, the 5th one is taken from Nyaya Deepavali of Ananda Bodhacharya. These are the 5 definitions. So there you can find all these, this process of being liberated from the Prapancha Buddhi is explained. So first definition, though this is an extended description, but we should know these 5 definitions to understand the real meaning of the coming passages. The first definition is that Mithya is anirvachaniya. That is Padmapada. That is the first important definition, and maybe the most important of the definitions, which Vyasa Tirtha Nyayamrita refutes, and later Advaita Siddhi by Madhusudana refutes the refutations of Vyasa Tirtha, defending these 5 definitions of Mithyatvam by Padmapada, Prakashatmedi, and Chitsukacharya, and Anandabodha. The first one is, Sadasatta Anadhikarnaturu Surupam Mithyatvam. Sadasatta Anadhikarnaturupam. Meaning that means that the Panchapadika. Means, what is Mithyatvam? So, Anirvachaniyatvam. That means, Sadasatta Anirvachaniyatvam. That means, it is not a locus of being, non-being. So, it is indescribable. Something which cannot be called real, because it is not abadhita. It gets cancelled. So it is not abadhita, it is subject to badha, means it's being cancelled. So the character of being corrected or cancelled when you get the clear understanding. At the same time, when you are living in this world, you experience it. You experience it in the Vyavaharika level. So it is not totally unreal. It is not asat like Vandhyaputra or Sasavishana. It's not asat. At the same time, it is not sat. Why? It is not sat because it gets cancelled when you get real understanding. but it's not asat because we experience it. So Mithyatvam is defined as Anirvachaniyatvam by Padmapada. This is the first definition. The second definition is by Prakashatmayadi, that is Pradipannobadho Traikalika Nisheda Pradiyogitvam va Mithyatvam. So you experience something on that locus, but there itself actually it doesn't exist either in the past, in the present or future. So Traikalika Nisheda Pradiyogitvam is a Pradiyogi, is object of negation in all the three conditions. That means the Sarpa did not exist in that rope before you brought light into the room. The Sarpa doesn't exist in the rope when you bring light in the room. And the Sarpa will not exist even after you have left the room. So, before you got the misunderstanding that there is a Sarpa, of course, before you got the misunderstanding, before you ever came to the room, the Sarpa did not exist. When you thought it is a Sarpa, before you brought light, Sarpa doesn't exist. When you bring light, obviously you understand Sarpa doesn't exist. And after you have left the room, the Sarpa doesn't exist. So, on the very object on which you superimpose Sarpa Buddhi, the Sarpa doesn't really exist. That is Pradipannobadho Traikalika Nisheda Pradiyogitvam va Mithyatvam. That means it implies the world of multiplicity is eternally negated, completely negated in Brahman. Prapancha did not exist in Brahman in the past. Prapancha doesn't exist Brahman now, and Prapancha will not exist in future. Before you got Brahmajnanam, the Prapancha did not exist. And when you get Brahmajnanam, obviously you understand it doesn't exist. And later also it won't exist. Let's go Traikalika Nisheda Pradiyogitvam. So here also the same. Even if you think this world exists, it doesn't exist. That's why the Karika is very, very important, Prapancho yadi vidyeda nivarteda na samseka. If the Prapancha actually existed, it has to go away. But it did not exist in the past, even when we thought it existed. It doesn't exist now, when you understand that it really doesn't exist, and in future also it will not exist. So this second definition, Mithyatvam. The third definition of Mithyatvam is Jnana-nivartyatvam. When you get Brahmajnanam, immediately it is negated. It's again actually not totally different from the previous definitions. That is, of course, there are, for each of these, each of these definitions, there are certain pramana vakyas are there. One is the second definition. It is Neha Nanasti Kinchana. That is the second. That is the pramana vakya for Pradipannobadho Nisheda Traikalika Nisheda Pradiyogitvam. That is Neha Nanasti Kinchana. That is one. For the third definition is Jnana-nivartyatvam. Vidwan Namarupa Vimukta Paratparam Purusham Ubayati Divyam. That is again. That mantra, Upanishad mantra is there. That's a pramana vakya. I mean, when you get real knowledge, you transcend it, it is cancelled, it disappears. That's the idea behind. The fourth definition is Swasrenishtha Atyanta Bhava Pradiyogitvam va Mithyatvam. That is Tattva Pratipika by Chitsukacharya. What it means is, that is the falsity, I mean the false nature of anything, its character It is a pradyogi of absolute negation that resides in what it appears to be substratum. What means Sarpa is negated on the very rope in which you saw Sarpa. You mistook the rope for the snake and you thought it is a snake, and the snake idea is negated on the very object, on the very substratum. That is why swasrenishta atyanta bhava pradyogitvam va mithyatvam. So it is negated on the very ashraya on which you superimposed the snake idea. So snake is negated on the very rope which you mistook to be the snake. Similarly, prapancha is negated on the very object on which you superimposed prapancha. That's what happened. That is prapancho edi vidyeda nivarteda na samseka. If prapancha really existed, it has to go away. So when a person gets turiya jnana, what happens is, what he mistook to be prapancha is now recognized to be Brahman. Just as what you mistook to be the sarpa, the snake, is now recognized to be the Rejju, because it was on Rejju. Rejju was the ashraya, the locus on which you superimposed sarpa. And on that very ashraya, sarpa buddhi is now negated. That means sarpa really did not come to the room, did not remain there, so it did not go away. That's why prapancho yadi vidyeda nivarteda na samseka. If prapancha actually existed, it has to go away. That's the idea behind. The fifth definition is very simple. That is sat viviktatvam va mithyat. That is Ananda Bodha's Nyaya Deepavali. That's the fifth definition, with Madhusudana refutes. That means here, it means consists being different. Sat viviktatvam. It is different and distinct from sat. That means this prapancha, what you see in front of you, is actually distinct and different and separate from the true reality. That's the idea behind. So there's a 5 definitions are applicable in these 2 coming paragraphs. That's the idea behind. That's a vidyamanasche nivarteda na samseka. Nahi rajjvam bhranti buddhya kalpita sappo vidyamanasan vivekata nivartaha nacha maya vina prayukta dadarsinam chakshubandha bhagame vidyamana sati nivrta tathedam prapanchakhyam maya matram dvaitam. That's why this idam prapanchakhyam maya matram. That is, there is neither prapancha pravritti or prapancha nivritti. There is no prapancha, so there is no going away from prapancha. It is a building up to that fundamental thesis, na nirodho, na chotpatti, na bandho, na cha sadhaka, na mumukshu, na vai mukta ittesha paramartha. That will come later. Means there is no bondage, so no liberation, no spiritual effort, because there is nothing to attain. That idea comes later. Nacha maya vina prayukta tadarsinam chakshubandha bhagame vidyamana sati nivarta tadedam prapanchakhyam maya matram dvaidam. So maya matram means there is neither srishti nor pralaya, neither pravritti nor nivritti. But remember, pravritti is there, nivritti is there for the sadhaka. That is an important point. This is a state of Advaita Anubhuti, Turiya Anubhuti. We should not imagine that this is something very wonderful, so we need not do any spiritual practice, neither pravritti nor nivritti, etc. That will be pure, it will be self-deception really. Every spiritual seeker should live in this world as if the world is real, as if bondage is real, and then he should work out. When he reaches the highest state of spiritual liberation, then only when we look back, then he will really understand actually there was no bondage. So when you are discovering your own true nature, but you will understand this only when you have discovered your true nature. Bhashyakara says elsewhere, Prag Brahmatma Vijnana Sarva Loka Vyavaharanam Sattittu Upapattihi Yada Swapnadrishta Seva Prag Prabodhat. So Prag Brahmatma Vijnana. Before we reach this level of spiritual experience, Turiya Jnanam, till then we should assume as if the world is real. And then we must do spiritual practices, meditation, japa, whatever it is. And then when we reach that experience, then only we will understand actually I was discovering my own true nature. Because this Turiya Jnanam doesn't come from outside. It is not a karya, it is not an effect. So that way it is not upadhya, it is not samskaya, it is not vikarya, it is not apya. The Bhashyakara says in other places, it is not something that you attain, not something that you produce. Turiya Jnanam is not something that you reach, but you understand this only when you reach that destination. That's an idea behind, to be understood. Bhashyakara is very, very realistic. Very often he tells this, he makes this point very clear. It is not a mental construct, because people can easily say, I am Advaita, I can not worry about anything. It is not something that you believe in. It is something that we experience. As a result of our own spiritual journey, it may take several life cycles. So that's an important point to remember. Otherwise, Mandukya Karika philosophy can be very misleading if it is not properly understood. So, Prapancha Nivritti and Prapancha Pravritti in the ultimate sense doesn't exist, but that is a state of spiritual experience, and it becomes real only when we reach that state, not before that. Before that, we must practice the sadhana chatushtaya sambatti, sravana, manana, nididhyasana, upasana, karma yoga. All these are very, very important. Rajjuvat mayavivaccha advaitam paramarthadaha tasman na kaschit prapanchaka pravritto nivritto va astitya abhiprayaka. So that's why. So this Rajjuvat Mayavivat. Rajju. So Rajju and Mayavi is like Satyam. Sarpa and Maya like Prapancha. So Rajju, so here the analogy of course. Mayavi is real, magician is real, he has come to the court and is playing this game. But what he creates in front of us is unreal. Similarly, the rope is real, but the snake, the crack on the floor, the water line and the stick, danda, bhuchidra, sarpa, jaladhara, all these vikalpas, these superimpositions are unreal, but Rajju is real in the analogy. Similarly, this manifold magic show that we see in front of us is unreal. The magician is actually real. So we'll continue in the next session. Thank you. Namaskar. We can.
Om Shanti Shanti Shanti